You're watching UATV News. My name is Inna Kosinska. Good evening. The U.S. Secretary of Defense has declared his support for Ukraine. Washington is monitoring movement of the Russian troops near the borders of our country, said Lloyd Austin before the meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Alexei Reznikov. The head of the Pentagon announced his readiness to consider the implementation of the framework agreement on defense partnership between Ukraine and the United States. He emphasized it is necessary to counter Russian aggression and cooperation in such areas as security in the Black Sea, cybersecurity and information exchange. Alexei Reznikov in turn thanked the United States for supporting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. According to him, it is very important to discuss what the response will be in case Russia decides to aggravate the conflict.
In Ukraine, we are well aware that Russia may resort to escalation at any time. And we are ready to defend our country and the future of our children. This possible escalation will certainly have catastrophic consequences for the whole of Europe. Whether it will take place depends to a large extent on the unity and determination of the civilized world to stop the aggression.
Angela Merkel expressed regret at the disruption of the Normandy meeting at the level of foreign ministers. Acting Chancellor of Germany noted that the negotiations are necessary. She stressed that if under the pretext of discussing the final document, the meeting does not take place, it will be impossible to achieve any results. Earlier, France and Germany proposed to halt the Normandy ministerial meeting on November 11th. However, Russia refused. It was not satisfied with the draft final statement.
Auch den russischen Präsidenten darum gebeten, dass
I asked the Russian president to hold such a meeting while I remained chancellor. I even wished to meet at the level of heads of state, but unfortunately this did not happen. Therefore, I express great regret. In my opinion, such a meeting should have taken place. Russia's interest in the migration crisis on Belarus-Poland border. Official Kremlin does not intervene in the situation. However, according to experts, Putin can take advantage of it, namely in the context of conflict with Ukraine. Several world leaders have already warned about it. What are those threats and will Ukraine be able to resist them? My colleagues found out.
The real goal of the migration crisis on Poland-Belarus border is to divert attention from new military attacks on Ukraine. Prime Minister of Poland Mateusz Morawiecki said this in an interview with the Bild.
Russian President Vladimir Putin, together with Alexander Lukashenko, are jointly working upon destabilization of the situation in Western countries. I do not exclude that this is done to distract attention from a large-scale invasion in Ukraine.
International experts initially said that this crisis was artificial, and Lukashenko organized it having the Kremlin's support. But at the same time, Minsk and Moscow will use it in different ways, covering each other. Lukashenko's main goal is to take revenge on the EU for sanctions.
It is about the EU's position on the internal political crisis in Belarus, about non-recognition of the results of the presidential elections and Lukashenko himself. Their second task is to force the EU to start negotiations with the official Minsk, which the EU politicians do not recognize. The goal is that Minsk refuses to blackmail Europe with migrants, and the Europe makes concessions in terms of either lifting sanctions or reducing them or not introducing new ones.
Experts say that Vladimir Putin has larger-scale goals. Russian publicist Andrei Piontkovsky is sure that the migration crisis created by Kremlin opened two fronts of hybrid war at once.
Macron and Merkel are calling him. He creates crises in order to offer his help in resolving them. Well, he is a living person, and it is always pleasant for him to initiate turmoil in the West for any reason. This is also an important motive. The worse the West treats Lukashenko, the more he becomes defenseless in the face of the fraternal embrace of the Russian bear.
And in this migration blackmailing, Putin can outplay Lukashenko.
It's not about our soul anymore. It's more about Belarusian soul. They may be a double game. On one hand, there is pressure on Europe made with Lukashenko's hands creating the crisis, and on the other hand, it is very profitable for Russia to initiate shooting at the border and send troops to Belarus and then force Lukashenko to sign the unification of two states.
Kremlin claims that they do not pose a threat to anyone. However, despite the contradictory data on pulling Russian troops to our borders, Ukrainian border guards are on duty in enhanced mode always.
The border with Russia is given a lot of attention since the start of Russian aggression towards Ukraine. All our units have been in an enhanced mode all the time. The border is being reinforced. We have combat reserves that are staying on the borderline and are ready to act in any area. The personnel are trained and ready for any development. In fact, they can now be described as a combat unit.
At the same time, Ukraine's Minister of Defense considers deterring Russia a common task for Ukraine and the West. And in the foreseeable future, the European military may appear on the territory of Ukraine as part of a training mission. In particular, such an initiative was supported by the Baltic states as well as Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Sweden. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Irina Kovalenko, UATV News.
If necessary, the US will find ways to ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. This was stated by the Chargé d'Affaires of the United States in Ukraine, Kvien. She also noted the provocative statements of the Kremlin, which are inconsistent with the spirit of cooperation and are not constructive. According to Kvien, Washington is discussing the accumulation of Russian troops near the Ukrainian borders with allies and partners. They continue to try to shift the blame for the lack of progress in the peace process, while it is entirely their responsibility. We do not see this as a constructive way of getting closer to trying to resolve the peace process or trying to work with international partners. The migration crisis in Belarus is controlled by the Russian special services. This was stated by Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Denis Monastirskiy. According to him, the Kremlin benefits from destabilization of the situation on the border with the EU, and the next step could be an attempt to break through the Belarus-Ukrainian border. Ukraine is getting ready for such provocations by mobilizing forces. At the same time, according to the minister, there is no need to declare a state of emergency yet, but the parliament should be ready to do this anytime.
We have identified up to 10 potentially vulnerable areas with a total length of about 270 kilometers. Aviation of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, 2 aircraft and 44 unmanned aerial vehicles were brought on duty. Command and staff exercises were held as well.
At the meantime, the Ukrainian border guards are already working in an enhanced mode and are preparing for any development of the situation at the checkpoints. In one of them, in the Yarylovichi in Chernihiv region, where the border is crossed by cars and freight transport in 8 lanes, daily training of the border detachment took place. The officers worked out maneuvers in case of possible illegal crossing attempts. The exact number of law enforcement officers is not indicated here, but the military forces are sufficient to prevent any aggressive actions, they stress.
We understand the position and understand what is going on along the borders of Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. The Chernihiv border detachment was reinforced by the reserves of the main service, reinforced by units of the National Guard and National Police.
Ukrainian border guards detained 15 foreigners from the Middle East. They tried to get from Belarus to Ukraine. They arrived at the checkpoint in Chernihiv region by a bus from Minsk. And they tried to convince the employees of the State Border Service that they were allegedly going to Ukraine to admire the landscapes of the Lviv region. Those people caused suspicion of the border guards when it became clear that foreigners received their passports in the same period, in September-October of this year. Anyone involved in the leak of information about the work of the Ukrainian special services faces from 2 to 5 years in prison. It goes about organizing an operation to detain members of the private military company Wagner on the territory of Ukraine. The check has already been initiated by the State Bureau of Investigations. The media released documents confirming the data of the investigators of the Wagnergate Center about preparation of the detention of the Wagner servicemen. Last year, 3,000 people were detained in Belarus. They were called mercenaries from the aforementioned Russian private military company. The authenticity of the documents will be verified, and the military personnel who had access to those documents and may be involved in their leak will be identified. Investigation under Part 1 of Article 329 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine is initiated. That is, disclosure of information constituting a state secret by a person to whom this information was entrusted or became known in connection with the performance of official duties in the absence of signs of high treason. Another 100 families of Ukrainian IDPs won the lottery under the Affordable Mortgage Program. Thus, a total of 700 program participants received the right to a loan for a period of up to 20 years at 3% per annum based on the results of 4 draws. According to the Ministry of Communities and Territories Development, the program becomes more and more popular. There are already more than 21,500 people willing to participate in it.
This project is being implemented within the framework of the intergovernmental program of Germany and Ukraine, within the framework of which we have received a grant in amount of 25.5 million euros. The grant is given to us in tranches of 5 million euros each. As of today, we still have unused 1.2 million euros, for which we are raffling off those 100 possible loans.
Attempted assassination of Ukraine's Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food, Roman Leshchenko. Those who ordered it face a life sentence. This was stated by Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Denis Monastyrsky. Who are the suspects and what is the stand of a targeted minister? Our correspondents found out.
The special operation of the security forces has lasted since August. Two suspect citizens of Ukraine and the US tried to order 2 hits. The first has been imitated by the police, who sent the fake assassin to the perpetrators. And according to the criminal's plan, Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine, Roman Leshchenko, had to be the second victim.
There was a meeting of actual hirers and a person thought to be a killer. The whole operational situation of the crime was considered in the restaurant during this meeting. Hirers left a deposit in a sum of some $20,000. As planned, the US citizen had to leave Ukraine right after the meeting, so that the crime was committed during his stay in the United States. Having recorded the video, a short fragment of which you see, it was decided to detain the person.
Roman Leshchenko said that the hirer, a US citizen, has been intimidating him for quite a long time. Minister considered the crime to be connected with his business activities, a corporate conflict that began back in 2018 before he became engaged in politics.
This has nothing to do with my civil service. This was a civil dispute. Relevant provisions of a procedural law entered into force recently regarding this case. Relevant court rulings enacted. And I have outlined the position that this person's fraudulent actions be legally assessed according to prejudicial of previous court acts, and the liability will be considered under the legislation of the United States.
They state in the Interior Ministry, if the suspects are proven guilty, they face a life sentence. Reported by Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
The number of new cases of COVID-19 is on the rise. Over the past day, more than 20,000 cases have been recorded in Ukraine. There's over 1,000 children among them. 725 people died. Most of all new infections were detected in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, as well as in Kyiv city. The new national award in the field of science and research is set. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has signed an order constituting the National Paton Prize. The face of an honorary medal holds the portrait of prominent Ukrainian scientist Boris Paton. The subscript on the edge reads National Boris Paton Prize. A gear and an open book on the reverse are supplemented with a stylized image of an atom. The sum of the prize will be determined by a dedicated presidential order annually. The noise of the metro, conversation in Bessarabsky market and the shouts of fans at the Olympijski Stadium, those completely different sounds of the capital of Ukraine, were combined in one single art object by authors of the Sounds of the City project. The audio track was transformed using special sound design and 3D visualization programs. Famous people of Kyiv, athletes, artists, doctors, TV presenters were engaged in the selection of sounds. Their Sounds of the City are already installed in Kharkiv, Odessa, Lviv, Dnipro and Mariupol cities. The plans for future of the project also include recording of the sounds of the Crimea and Donbass. We decided that the Crimea and Donbass will be in our project. I think there is no need to explain why.
This is an interesting project. I joined it with pleasure, but at first I did not understand how this might sound. And then I realized that Khreshchatyk also sounds its own way. I also have the famous song about Kyiv's Central Street. And I must say that Khreshchatyk Street sounds way different than the Podil or Andreevsky descent, for instance.
New banknotes will start circulating in Ukraine. The National Bank has introduced commemorative banknotes of 20 and 200 hryvnias dedicated to the 30th anniversary of independence. They were released in a circulation of 30,000 pieces. The security system on the banknotes is traditional, while some new symbols have been added to the front side. In August, the National Bank has issued a 500 hryvnias note from this series, and in December it will introduce two more, 50 and 1,000 hryvnias. That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. Goodbye.